is there a real plan to destroy the group that calls itself the Islamic State? Joining us now, the chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, Michael McCaul, and the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Robert Menendez. Gentlemen, before we get to foreign policy, I want to pick up on what I was just discussing with Governor Romney. President Obama has decided to delay any executive action on delaying the deportation of millions of illegals until after the November election. Senator Menendez, let me start with you. Are you disappointed with the delay? And isn't this all about politics and the fact that a bunch of red state senators that are seeking re-election, Democratic senators seeking re-election, didn't want this before the November election?
Well, Chris, the red state senators already voted, I think most of them voted in favor of comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform. So they're on the record on that. I don't think it's about that.
They're not on the record on executive action, sir.
Well, that's what the focus is more about the question of executive action. Yeah, and I'm deeply disappointed that the president hasn't acted where House Republicans have failed to act. This was sent over to them over a year ago with a strong bipartisan vote in the Senate. But look, Republicans are on the wrong side of the inevitable tide of history here. And I think you could ask your previous guest, Mitt Romney, how it's impossible for Republicans to have a road to the White House without embracing immigration reform and the immigrant communities.
Chairman McCaul, some of your fellow Republicans are saying, look, the president still wants to go around the law. He's just going to wait until after November when voters can no longer hold him accountable.
Well, I think it's totally politically calculated. He's made this determination that if he gets out in front on this issue, it will hurt 7 to 8 Senate races, and he could potentially lose the Senate. I think Harry Reid has sent that message clearly to the president, which is why I think you've seen him back off of this position. So I think it's nothing more than raw politics, and the idea of amnesty by executive action, I think to House Republicans does not sit well.
Let's turn, gentlemen, to ISIS and the threat of ISIS to the U.S. homeland. Chairman McCaul, there's been a lot of talk about Americans, maybe as many as 100, who have left the United States, gone over to the Middle East, and are fighting alongside ISIS. How concerned are you about them coming home and conducting terrorist attacks, and especially as we approach this week, the 13th anniversary of 9/11?
I'm extremely concerned about this problem. I know intelligence officials, Homeland Security officials are concerned about this. We've had 2 be on the lookout notices that have already gone out by the FBI and Homeland Security officials. I think the biggest concern, Chris, is what you outlined, and that is we have somewhere between 100 to 200 Americans that have left the United States to go over there. We have tens of thousands of foreign fighters, many with Western passports that can get legally into Western Europe and many into the United States of America. And I think that's a threat. You don't know what you don't know. And as we approach the anniversary of 9/11, anniversaries mean a lot to al-Qaeda. We know in the bin Laden compound he had plans to attack on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. So I think we're going to be on a very high state of vigilance on 9/11. And I do think the threat is very real. But the best way to deal with this threat is to take out ISIS where they exist today. And that's not just Iraq, that's also in Syria.
I'm going to get to that in a moment, if I may, but let's bring in Senator Menendez on the threat to the homeland. The Brits increased the security level to severe because of all the foreign fighters, including many with hundreds with British passports, and the threat that they might come home. Are you worried about Americans or other Westerners who can get into this country, and especially as we look ahead to this 9/11 anniversary, Senator?
Well, Chris, as someone who lost over 700 citizens on September 11th from New Jersey, I'm always concerned. ISIS is a savage terrorist organization that has to be defeated before they can create the operational wherewithal to conduct a September 11th-like tragedy. And so we have to use all of our intelligence to make sure that those who hold U.S. passports or those from European countries that have easier access into the United States can be thwarted before they in fact come here and or are reviewed to make sure that they don't become a threat here on the homeland. And at the same time, we have to strike at ISIS and make sure that they cannot become the threat that we lived under September 11th, 13 years ago.
Okay, let's pick up on that. President Obama, I think you both agree, had several stumbles on describing ISIS. First, he had no strategy. Then he talked about shrinking it to a manageable problem. After the NATO summit, he came up with this formulation.
We are going to achieve our goal. We are going to degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL.
But there is still no plan to hit ISIS in its base of operations in Syria, and we still don't know what the 9 other countries in the coalition are going to do. Chairman McCaul, does the president have a strategy now?
Well, I think, as you point out, the mixed messages coming out of the White House has been very confusing and I think dangerous to American lives. I don't still know what the clearly defined strategy is. As his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dempsey, said, to defeat ISIS, you have to defeat them where they exist and where their command and control structure is, and that is in Syria. But he seems to be backing off from that. And his policy so far has been a policy of containment, not of defeat. And to obtain that objective, I do believe you have to go into Syria. Now, the president's going to talk to the American people on Wednesday. I hope that he expands this into Syria, where ISIS is strongest. And I do think he needs to go to the Congress to update the authorized use of military force to get the additional authorities against ISIS and into Syria.
Let me bring Senator Menendez into this, as has just been pointed out. Still no plan to launch airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. And when it comes to the ground game, we're back to talking about the long-forgotten, much-neglected, free, moderate Syrian rebels. Senator, are you satisfied that this president now has a coherent plan to destroy ISIS?
I think that what he said at the beginning, I think he misspoke. What he really said was he hadn't decided on the strategy yet. But look, I see a developing strategy here. I see a combination of air and drone strikes against ISIS's leaders, targets, and positions. I see a coalition that is developing out of NATO. I see moderate countries that are aligned with us, like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, contributing to the effort. I see the ability to have Iraqi army and Peshmerga deal on the ground with the successes of airstrikes as it relates to ISIS targets in Iraq. And then, of course, you have to, as I've called for and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee's called for some time, robustly help the moderate vetted rebels to take over the ground for airstrikes in Syria. I do see that coming together, and I think when the president speaks to the country on Wednesday, and then the subsequent follow-up that will come before the Congress, we are clearly headed to a strategy that will defeat ISIS.
Gentlemen, we have about 2 minutes left, and I want you to share it evenly, because I want to talk about Ukraine, where there's now a ceasefire, but a ceasefire that leaves the pro-Russian separatists in control of large swaths of eastern Ukraine. President Obama said he's skeptical about the ceasefire, but he also seemed to, in a sense, see it as a victory for NATO. Take a look at this.
The only reason that we're seeing this ceasefire at this moment is because of both the sanctions that have already been applied and the threat of further sanctions.
Chairman McCaul, who's won here, the U.S. and NATO or Putin and Russia?
Well, I think long-term Putin is winning. I think weakness invites aggression. That's what you're seeing. I think Senator Menendez has called this an invasion, and I agree with that. The Crimea example is, I think, the model here that Putin, if you look at long-term strategy, what is he trying to accomplish? I believe in targeting Russian-speaking peoples across not only Ukraine but the Baltic nations is a policy to regain the glory days of the old Soviet Empire. And with respect to the ceasefire, yeah, we're all very hopeful, but the problem is, even this morning now, you had airstrikes that have basically violated that ceasefire agreement. So I think we're dealing with a very dangerous force here. And I don't think until NATO and the United States leads and actually arms Ukraine with lethal weapons are you going to see Putin really backing off?
Well, Senator Menendez, you're just back from the region. As Congressman McCall pointed out, you have called it an invasion, even if the administration hasn't. You have called for sending military weapons to Ukraine, even though the administration hasn't. Are you satisfied with the ceasefire that leaves the separatists in control of broad swaths of territory in eastern Ukraine?
Absolutely not. Look, until Russia returns its thousands of forces and tanks and military equipment back over the border into Russia, and there is a border that is secured, hopefully with international observers, and Ukraine's territorial sovereignty is retained, there is not a solution. This is a temporary pause. And we have to take Putin's calculations and show him he's wrong, which means that sanctions being considered beyond what we've done by both the EU and the United States should take place, should move forward. Okay. And secondly, that we should give the Ukrainians the ability to fight for themselves. That will change Putin's calculations.
Senator Menendez, Congressman McCall, we want to thank you both so much. Thanks for talking with us today, gentlemen.
Thanks,
Good
Chris.
to be with you.